Here is the base piece for my tree, so I'm just kind of like sizing it up and getting it into the center. And these will be like little root pieces, you don't want them to look the same. You want it to be pretty organic looking, so kind of just go with the flow and make it look as best you can. Right, so I'm kind of just like eyeing up where I want to put those root pieces, and then I'm drawing more of a stump-like shape around everything, so it's not just like a square at the bottom. I want it to look as real as possible. Also, I want to cut this open just to make it easier to carry, and also so I can staple the concrete tube and the root pieces from the inside as well. But it definitely did come in handy when I was going to transport this tree because it ended up very heavy, so it gives you like a handle to hold on to. Alright, got my base all stapled in, and then here I am flipping it just to pound down those staples and do a couple more from the inside just so no one pokes their hand while transporting this. They do make these concrete tubes in 8-foot sections, which would have been nice, but they only had 4 foot where I was located. So right now I'm making these brace pieces to staple it all together. And then I added a couple on the outside to sandwich the cardboard tube in between the two support pieces, which I think gave it a lot of nice stability. Now that's all done, it's time for the chicken wire. So you don't actually want the chicken wire like wrapped tight around the tube. You want to leave it looking pretty organic, like lumpy in some places, not in others. And you also want room for the foam insulation and concrete to grab onto it. So don't stretch it tight around the tube, but definitely make sure you staple it in really well to like the wood base and the support pieces in the middle and to the tube obviously as well, because it will be holding a lot of weight with the insulation and the concrete coming up. So yeah, just don't make it too tight, but make sure it's secure, if that makes sense. And then just do the chicken wire all the way up and then wrap it around the top of the concrete tube and staple it on the inside. Alright, now that that's all done, you can see how it's supposed to look here. I really have it stapled in good to those wood supports, like I said. And then you can see that it's really not too tight all the way around. You know, I give it some space here and there, kind of crumple it up a little here and there, and just overall left enough room while keeping it tight enough. Alright, time for the foam insulation. On this first step, I want to like really make sure it's in all the cracks and against the tube nice and tight behind the chicken wire there. So yeah, moving on, there will be a lot of foam insulation. I'm not gonna lie about that part. So on this first layer here, I tried to like space it apart well enough because it's going to expand, you know, a good couple inches. So to give it room to expand and just to save on foam, try to kind of like go in like a Z pattern and give it a little space because that'll save a considerable amount of foam and also save you on the next part where you have to trim the foam. Alright, like 10 cans of spray foam later, after it's all dried and cured, you're going to want to trim the super lumpy spots because otherwise it's just going to get in the way when you go to do the concrete stamping and it's quite annoying. Like you can rip it out while doing the concrete stamping, but you just would rather have a more flush surface to do a nice thick enough layer to stamp the concrete, if that makes sense. If you have a multi-tool, it's really great for this. Honestly, I loved having that. It made it so much easier, but if not, you can rip it out by hand, you can use a knife, but the multi-tool is just a lot better. But, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, so do whatever works for you. This is basically how you want it to look. Like I said, a little more flush. You do want to expose some of the chicken wire. I thought it was pretty essential for the concrete to grab onto some of the chicken wire, not just foam. And also, these are my concrete stamps I made from silicone. I have another video on that. Peep that massive leg bruise right there from Muay Thai. So here's the first layer of concrete. I like to go through and get it into all those crevices, do a nice thin layer, and then come over with a thicker layer to actually stamp. So, yeah, it just made it easier all around for me. It's kind of taking my time a little too much right here, and it started curing a little fast on me, so I did have to wet it a little extra with the spray bottle and press it in a little harder than normal, but you get the idea, and the rest of the video shows a much more smooth stamping process. And yeah, I just used these 3 stamps and kind of varied the patterns to give it the look I wanted, and just kind of keep going with it until it looks about how you want. Here I'm moving much faster, and I used a little bit more set control to give me more working time so you can see a better representation of the stamping. It came out way better on this side, but either way, all of it together makes a very realistic tree. Thick bark, thin bark, doesn't really matter. It makes it look pretty organic. And then here I'm just taking this brush and kind of knocking down a little of the rough edges left by the stamps, but I think that was kind of just my OCD. Either way, I don't think this part was necessary. I think it just made it look cleaner, a little more smooth, but I kind of am a perfectionist, so do that if you want. Now just repeating that process all the way up until I get to the top of the tree. I am much more of a set builder and prop maker than a painter, so this was definitely a learning curve for me. In all honesty, if I was going to do it again, I would have based it all in black. I thought the dark brown would be enough, but you'll see in a few minutes here how much effort it was to go back through and repaint all the deep grooves with black. And also, I did add in black gesso and some water to all the acrylic paints to thin it out and give it more of a matte look, which I thought turned out cool. And I also just didn't want like there to be a sheen on camera either. Alright, now the base coat is done. So I had a red brown and like a green brown that I went through and painted on with a sponge. I thought it would look more organic doing it this way than a paintbrush, so you can do whatever works for you. I'm definitely not a scenic painter, so I kind of just stamped it all on there, and in the end I was happy with how it turned out. But if you have a better way, definitely leave that in the comments below, because painting is not my strong suit. Here you can really see what I'm talking about. So I went back through and hit those deep grooves with a black and a paintbrush, and then I take a sponge and kind of like fan it out a little bit so it blends better. But yeah, I would have definitely base coated this all in black and then did all the browns after if I could redo it. But here we are, painting each groove individually. It took hours. To make it look more realistic, I got some fake moss and I just used hot glue and pressed it into the deep grooves, and then kind of gave it a little trim to make it look more fitted to the tree. I made two of these trees for the studio owner. The one I kind of went heavy with the moss, and then the other one I left more bare for a different option of a tree. Do whatever works for you. He ended up loving both, so yeah, I like the one with the heavy moss, honestly, but either way works. It kind of just depends on what you're going for a final look. And all in all, I would say these trees ended up weighing around like 150 to 200 pounds. I'm quite small myself, and I was able to move this with a photographer, no problem. So it is definitely movable. Moving dolly is easier, but I was able to carry it and load it into a truck with one other guy. So they are movable and definitely weight bearing. I sat on top of these to finish the paint job, and I'm about 120 pounds. So here is the final product. Like I said, went heavy with the moss on the one and not so much on the other one. These are 8 feet tall. I'm really happy with how they turned out. This project definitely left me wanting to do more concrete stamping. If you guys could drop a like, a follow, a comment, a subscribe, I would greatly appreciate all of it, because I'm working very hard to build this channel and my TikTok channel currently. So thanks for watching. I hope some of this helps. If you have any questions, definitely leave it in the comments for me. I'd be happy to answer for you. Thanks, guys.